Welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories. The Lighthouse Keeper's log, January 3, 2023. The ferry couldn't get close enough to the island due to the storm, so I had to row the last 100 yards myself. The ferryman, an old salt named Garvey, seemed relieved not to approach any closer to Blackrock Point. He'd been unusually quiet during our journey, only speaking when necessary, his eyes constantly darting toward the lighthouse that loomed ahead of us. 3 months is a long time to be alone out there, he'd said as he helped load my supplies. Especially in winter, I assured him I was used to solitude. After 15 years as a lighthouse keeper at various stations along the coast, isolation was more companion than enemy. Besides, this temporary assignment was exactly what I needed, time away from everything, especially after what happened with Diane. When I reached the rocky shore, I looked back to wave at Garvey, but he was already steering away, the ferry's lights dimming in the mist. I couldn't blame him, the weather was turning foul and night was approaching. The lighthouse stood stark against the darkening sky, its beam already cutting through the gathering gloom. According to the coastal authority, the previous keeper had left abruptly, citing personal reasons. Not uncommon in this profession, the loneliness gets to most eventually. As I trudged up the path, my duffel bag heavy on my shoulder, I felt the familiar sense of purpose that always accompanied a new assignment. Lighthouses need tending, ships need guidance, some things remain constant in this changing world. The key worked smoothly in the lock. Inside, the lighthouse was immaculate, almost unnaturally so. Most keepers leave some personal mark, but this place looked like it had been scrubbed clean of any human presence. No photographs, no books left behind, nothing. I climbed the spiral staircase to the lantern room. The Fresnel lens rotated steadily, the mechanism humming with well-oiled precision. At least the previous keeper had maintained the equipment properly before his hasty departure. In the keeper's quarters below, I unpacked my few belongings. The radio crackled with the evening weather report, more storms expected throughout the week. I made a simple dinner and reviewed the logbook. That's when I noticed something odd. The previous keeper, a man named Thomas Corbin, had maintained meticulous records for months, and then the entry simply stopped 3 weeks ago. No final entry, no explanation, nothing, just a blank page where his last log should have been. The coastal authority hadn't mentioned this. They'd simply said he'd resigned and left, and that I was to maintain the lighthouse until a permanent replacement could be found. I made my first entry in the logbook, noting my arrival and the weather conditions, then turned in for the night. The keeper's bed was surprisingly comfortable, though the sound of waves crashing against the rocks below took some getting used to. As I drifted off to sleep, I could have sworn I heard footsteps on the stairs, but I dismissed it as the settling of an old building in the wind. January 5, 2023. Something strange happened last night. I was awakened around 3 a.m. by what sounded like voices coming from the lantern room. At first, I thought it might be radio interference. Sometimes the equipment picks up fragments of ship communications, but this was different. It sounded like a conversation, though I couldn't make out the words. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed the stairs. The lantern room was empty, the lens continuing its steady rotation. The radio was off. Through the glass, I could see nothing but darkness and the beam of light stretching out over the black water. As I turned to leave, I noticed a smudge on one of the windows, a handprint that hadn't been there when I'd cleaned the glass earlier that evening. It was larger than my own hand, the fingers unusually long. I've been a keeper long enough to know that lighthouses make strange noises. The wind, the water, the machinery, they all contribute to a symphony that can play tricks on a tired mind. But that handprint troubled me. I checked all the doors and windows, everything was secure. No one could have entered the lighthouse without my knowledge. I'm alone here, miles from the mainland. I'll chalk it up to exhaustion from the journey and the adjustment to a new post. Still, I've decided to keep my service revolver closer at hand, just in case. January 8, 2023. 3 days of brutal storms. The waves have been crashing halfway up the lighthouse, and the wind howls like a living thing. I've been busy maintaining the light and radio, sending weather reports back to the mainland. The isolation feels more pronounced during storms like this, knowing that no one could reach me even if they wanted to. I found something today while checking the storage room. Behind some old equipment was a box containing personal items that must have belonged to Thomas Corbin, the previous keeper. Strange that he would leave these things behind if he departed voluntarily. Among the items were several notebooks filled with personal journal entries distinct from the official logbook. I know I shouldn't have, but I read some of them. The early entries were mundane, observations about the weather, complaints about supply deliveries, notes about maintenance tasks. But the later entries became increasingly erratic. Corbin wrote about hearing voices in the night, seeing lights on the horizon that didn't match any known shipping lanes. He became obsessed with a particular phenomenon. Ships that would appear in the distance but wouldn't respond to radio calls. Ships that, according to his increasingly frantic notes, shouldn't exist. In his final entry, dated just one day before his record-keeping stopped, he wrote, "It's coming closer tonight, God help me, I think it's finally found what it's looking for." I put the journals back in the box and returned it to its hiding place. Lighthouse keeping attracts a certain type of person, those comfortable with solitude, but sometimes that solitude breeds paranoia. I've seen it happen before, keepers who start seeing patterns in random events who assign meaning to coincidence. Still, as I made my rounds tonight, checking the light in the foghorn, I found myself scanning the horizon more carefully than usual. January 10, 2023, I saw one of them last night. I was in the lantern room, polishing the brass fittings, when I noticed a light on the horizon. At first, I thought it was a fishing vessel, though it would be unusual for anyone to be out in these waters at night, especially with the weather we've been having. I trained my binoculars on it. What I saw made no sense. It was a ship, yes, but unlike any modern vessel. It appeared to be a clipper ship, the kind that hasn't sailed these waters in a century or more. Its sails were full despite the lack of wind, and it moved with purpose, cutting through the waves. Most disturbing of all, it seemed to be glowing from within, as if lit by some internal fire that cast an eerie green light across the water. I immediately checked the shipping schedules and radio for any reported vessels in the area. Nothing. I considered sending out a call myself, but hesitated. What would I say? That I'd seen a ghost ship from another century. I watched it for nearly an hour as it sailed parallel to the shore, never approaching, never retreating, until it disappeared into a bank of fog that hadn't been there minutes before. I'm writing this now in the official logbook, though I'm tempted to omit it, but keepers before me have reported stranger things, and accuracy is our primary duty. I'll simply record what I saw and let others draw their own conclusions. After making the entry, I returned to Corbin's journals, reading more carefully now. He had seen similar vessels, not just one, but several over his months here. He'd even sketched some of them. A 19th-century whaler, a steamship from the early 1900s, a naval destroyer that he claimed matched the description of one lost during World War II. According to his increasingly detailed notes, these ships appeared only on certain nights, usually during or just after storms, and always followed the same path, as if searching for something along the coast. The rational part of my mind suggests explanations. Unusual atmospheric conditions creating mirages, exhaustion causing hallucinations, perhaps even elaborate hoaxes by local fishing boats. But another part of me, the part that has spent years watching the sea and respecting its mysteries, wonders if Corbin was onto something. I'll keep watching, and I'll keep the radio ready in case one of these vessels decides to make contact. January 12, 2023, I received a call from the Coastal Authority today. The monthly supply boat will be delayed due to continued bad weather. I assured them I had plenty of provisions to last until they could reach me. The representative I spoke with, a woman named Martinez, asked routine questions about the lighthouse's condition and my welfare. When I mentioned finding some personal items belonging to the previous keeper, her tone changed. "Corbin left nothing behind," she said firmly. "His quarters were empty when our team arrived." "Then someone else must have left these things," I replied. "There's a box with journals, clothes, some photographs." A long pause followed. "What photographs?" I described them. Standard personal snapshots, mostly of Corbin himself in various locations, some with people I assumed were friends or family. "Mr. Thorne," she said, using a formality that hadn't been present earlier in our conversation, "Thomas Corbin was stationed alone at Blackrock Point for 14 months. He had no visitors. No one from the mainland went to the lighthouse during his tenure except for scheduled supply deliveries." "I don't understand what you're saying." "I'm saying that if there are photographs of Corbin with other people at the lighthouse, they cannot be authentic." After we disconnected, I returned to the storage room and retrieved the box. Looking more carefully at the photographs, I noticed something I'd missed before. In several of the images showing Corbin with visitors at the lighthouse, the same ships I'd seen on the horizon appeared in the background: the clipper, the whaler, the destroyer. Ships that shouldn't exist. More disturbing still, in one photograph of Corbin standing in the lantern room, there's a figure behind him, barely visible, standing in the shadows. The figure is tall, unnaturally so, with elongated limbs and a face that's just slightly wrong, not quite human. I've locked the box in a cabinet. Part of me wants to throw it into the sea, but I can't bring myself to do it. These may be the only clues to what happened to Corbin, why he left so suddenly, if he left at all. Tonight I'll watch for the ships again, and I'll make sure all the doors are locked. January 15, 2023, they're getting closer. The ships, I mean. Last night 3 of them appeared, forming a semicircle about a mile offshore. They remained stationary for hours, their strange lights pulsing in what almost seemed like a pattern or code. I tried reaching the mainland on the radio but got only static. The storm has worsened, with winds reaching gale force. I'm cut off. I've been reading more of Corbin's journals. In his later entries, he describes making contact with someone or something from one of the ships. He doesn't explain how this communication occurred, only that they had been watching the lighthouse for generations, waiting for something to align properly. They need a keeper, he wrote, not of the light but of the door, whatever that means. I found something else today while checking the base of the lighthouse for storm damage, a hidden door leading to a chamber that doesn't appear on any of the blueprints or maintenance documents. The door was locked, but I discovered a key among Corbin's belongings that fit perfectly. Inside was a small room, empty except for a table bearing a single object, a brass sextant of antique design, intricately engraved with symbols I didn't recognize. When I picked it up, it felt unnaturally cold, and I swear I could hear whispers emanating from it, too faint to make out words. I returned it to the table and left the room, locking the door behind me. But even now, hours later, I can still feel the cold of that metal on my fingertips, and the whispers seem to have followed me, hovering just at the edge of hearing. January 17, 2023. I haven't slept in 36 hours. The ships are still there, their lights visible even through the storm. Last night I saw figures moving on their decks, human shapes performing tasks with mechanical precision, their movements too fluid, too coordinated for normal sailors. The radio remains dead, but I've begun receiving transmissions through the lighthouse's ancient emergency system, a backup I didn't even know existed until I found it humming with activity in a corner of the control room. The messages are fragments distorted by static and in languages I don't recognize, though occasionally English phrases break through. The alignment approaches. The keeper must choose. The door stands ready. I've barricaded myself in the keeper's quarters, though I don't know what good it will do. Whatever is happening here goes beyond physical threats. I can feel the lighthouse changing around me, the walls seeming to shift when I'm not looking directly at them, the spiral staircase extending farther upward than should be possible in a structure of this height. And the lighthouse beam no longer sweeps in its programmed arc. Instead, it remains fixed, pointing directly at the center ship, the Clipper. I've tried to reset the mechanism, but it resists all my efforts, the controls frozen in place. I found more photographs in hidden compartments throughout the lighthouse. They show keepers dating back to the 1800s, all standing in the same spot, all with the same ships visible in the background, all with that same elongated figure lurking in the shadows behind them. And in the most recent photos, the figure stands closer to Corbin, its hand, with those impossibly long fingers, resting on his shoulder. Corbin's expression is one of resigned acceptance. I understand now why there was no final entry in the logbook, no record of his departure. Thomas Corbin never left Blackrock Point. January 19, 2023. The storm has stopped, but the silence that's replaced it is somehow worse. The ships remain in position, and I've seen smaller vessels, rowboats manned by figures in antiquated clothing, making their way toward the island. The hidden room with the sextant has changed. The table now holds additional items. A compass whose needle spins continuously, a logbook filled with entries in different handwritings, some in languages that appear to predate modern English, and a key larger than any I've ever seen, made of a metal that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it. I recognized one of the handwritings in the logbook. It was Corbin's. His entry, the final one in the book, reads simply, "I have opened the door, may those who follow forgive me." The whispers are constant now, no longer at the edge of hearing but clear and insistent. They speak of a passage between worlds, of ships that sail beyond the boundaries of reality, of a lighthouse that serves as more than a beacon for conventional vessels. I've tried to contact the mainland again, even attempted to signal passing aircraft with the lighthouse beam, but the light refuses to move from its fixed position pointing at the Clipper ship. Last night I saw Corbin. He was standing on the deck of the Clipper, visible through my binoculars. He looked unchanged except for his eyes, which reflected the same eerie green light that emanates from the ship itself. He raised his hand in what might have been a greeting or a warning. Behind him stood the elongated figure from the photographs, clearer now than in any image. Its face, if it can be called that, contains features that shift and rearrange themselves, as if unable to settle on a single configuration. Only the eyes remain constant, black voids that seem to pull at my vision, creating a vertigo effect even through the binoculars. I've gathered supplies in a backpack, food, water, a flashlight, Corbin's journals, and the revolver. I'm going to try to reach the far side of the island, where the cliffs are lower. Perhaps I can find a way down to the water, locate a hidden cove where I might signal a passing ship. It feels wrong to abandon my post, to leave the light unmanned, but I no longer believe I'm serving any maritime safety function here. Whatever this lighthouse guides, it isn't meant to keep ships away from dangerous shores. January 20, 2023. I couldn't leave. Every path I took led me in circles, returning me to the lighthouse no matter which direction I traveled. The island itself seems to be conspiring against my escape. The rowboats have reached the shore. Their occupants, I hesitate to call them men, though they wear the forms of sailors from different eras, have taken up positions around the lighthouse, standing motionless like sentinels. They haven't approached or attempted to enter, but they block any path to the water. I've brought the sextant, compass, logbook, and key up to the lantern room. Something told me they needed to be here, though I can't explain the compulsion. The whispers guided me, growing louder when I moved in the correct direction, fading when I strayed. The Fresnel lens has changed. The glass now contains swirling patterns that weren't there before, and the light it produces has shifted from white to green that matches the glow of the ships. Through the lens, I can see more than just the ocean and the three vessels. I see other waters, other worlds, coastlines that don't exist on any map, skies filled with impossible constellations, creatures that swim and fly in environments that should not sustain life. And I see doors, countless doors floating in the spaces between realities, each one locked, each one waiting. I understand now what the Keeper's true role is at Blackrock Point. We're not here to warn ships away from dangerous shores. We're here to guide certain vessels to a specific destination, a passage that only opens under particular conditions, accessible only with the right key and the right keeper. The alignment Martinez mentioned on the radio, it wasn't about supply schedules or staff rotations. It was about celestial positioning, about moments when the boundaries between worlds grow thin. Such a moment approaches. I can feel it in the humming of the lighthouse, in the intensifying glow of the ships, in the whispers that have become a chorus, urging me toward a decision I never thought I'd face. January 21, 2023. They've entered the lighthouse. The sailors, or the things wearing the forms of sailors, have taken up positions on every level, standing motionless, their eyes reflecting the same green light as the ships. They haven't interfered with me, but they watch my every move with an intensity that suggests both anticipation and warning. The elongated figure from the photographs now stands at the base of the stairs leading to the lantern room. I can hear its breathing, a sound like waves withdrawing over pebbles, rhythmic and somehow ancient. Through the Fresnel lens, I can see that the clipper ship has moved closer. It now sits directly in the path of the lighthouse beam, the green light seeming to pass through it rather than reflect off it, creating a corridor of illumination that extends far beyond what should be possible, reaching toward something I can barely perceive at the horizon, a distortion in the fabric of reality itself. The key I found grows warmer in my hand, pulsing in time with the light. The whispers have resolved into a single clear instruction, repeated in countless voices. Open the door. I don't know what lies beyond that door, what worlds these ships sail between, or what purpose they serve. I don't know if Corbin and the keepers before him were victims or willing participants in whatever ritual I'm now part of, but I do know that the alternative, resistance, is no longer possible. The island, the lighthouse, perhaps reality itself conspires to ensure the keeper fulfills his function. There is only forward now, only the door and what lies beyond it. I am writing this final entry in both Corbin's journal and the official logbook. Perhaps someone will find it someday and understand what happened here. Perhaps they'll send another keeper, unaware of the true nature of Blackrock Point, and the cycle will begin again. The elongated figure is climbing the stairs now. I can hear its approach, not footsteps, but a sliding, scraping sound that sets my teeth on edge. The key is burning hot against my palm, nearly unbearable, but I cannot release it. The whispers have become a roar, drowning out all other sound. Through the lens, I see the door now massive and ancient, floating in the space where the horizon should be. It matches no architectural style I recognize, its surface covered in symbols similar to those on the sextant. A keyhole at its center pulses with the same green light as the ship's. The elongated figure has reached the lantern room. It stands beside me now, its presence causing the air to feel thick and difficult to breathe. It extends one impossible hand, the fingers unfurling like tendrils, pointing toward the lens, toward the door beyond. I understand my choice now. I can use the key to open the door, allowing whatever waits on the other side to pass through, or to allow the ships to pass beyond our world into whatever realm lies waiting. Or I can destroy the key, breaking a chain that has existed perhaps for centuries, preventing whatever exchange or invasion or migration these entities have planned. The figure's hand is on my shoulder now, its touch cold and somehow vast, as if I'm being held not by a hand but by an ocean. The pressure is gentle but insistent, guiding me toward the lens. Through the glass, Corbin watches from the deck of the clipper. His expression is unreadable at this distance, but his posture suggests neither happiness nor suffering, merely a state of being fundamentally different from human existence. Is that what awaits me if I open the door? A transformation, a transcendence, a surrender of humanity for something older and vaster? Or is it oblivion, a sacrifice to powers beyond comprehension? The key burns brighter in my hand, and the door in the distance trembles with anticipation. The moment of alignment has arrived. I must decide. I raise the key toward the lens, toward the door beyond, toward whatever fate awaits on the other side. May those who follow forgive me.